Thanks for listening to the People, Not Titles podcast. We are brought to you by our great sponsors, Landtrust Title Services, your partners for results. Well, hello, this is Steve Kemp with the People, Not Titles podcast, and I am here with one of my favorite people, Tony Zielinski, Senior Vice President of Sales for Landtrust Title Services. Tony, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're excited. You know, we love to do these features where we talk about our clients and talk about their stories, and every now and then we want to bring someone in from our team to talk about their kind of career journey. There's a lot of young people that listen to our podcast that are making career decisions, and there's a lot of people with a lot of different aspirations, and it's always great to hear someone that has walked the road ahead of them to go, okay, these are some of the things I can expect. So, Tony, thanks for being here.
Like I said, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to do this. This is my first time getting a chance to do a podcast like this, and I'm pretty excited.
Great. So, Tony, you weren't born in the title industry, right?
Nope.
So let's talk a little bit about your journey, your career journey to what had you finally settling. You've been in the title industry for almost 20 years now?
Yeah, just about 20 years.
Okay, about 20 years. So at one point, you decided this is the industry I'm going to really add value. This is where Tony Zielinski is going to be. But before that, let's talk a little bit about how you sorted those things out.
Sure. I actually started working not in title insurance.
Mm-hmm.
I was working in a folding carton business. A friend and I, his dad had a folding carton company. We were the customer service team, so I got to learn a lot about the printing industry. Ironically, my grandfather worked on a printing press for 30 years, so it was kind of interesting to get a little
DNA.
Yeah. It was in. He would tell me stories, and sure, yeah, and then I got to experience some of that, and I thought, boy, working in a factory on a 150-degree hot printing press on a 100-degree day, that's pretty brutal. And what he did for all that time, I mean, I had a lot of respect for him.
Yeah, to pay the bills and to raise his family and whatnot.
Absolutely.
So Tony, you said customer service. Why was it customer service? Were they like, hey, this is a guy with a gift of gab, he's an extrovert? What was it?
It was being young and willing to learn. In a way, it was very similar to title insurance, is that nobody's going to college to get into folding cartons, and we always joke that nobody's going into college for title insurance. And so they just wanted young people to kind of teach the business too, and that's kind of where I fell. I was a people person. I always liked to gab, and I can really make friends with people in any kind of situation, and that's really what kind of put me into that path in that situation.
Was that a natural thing for you, Tony, or is this something you learned through sports or the way you were raised? Your ability to relate to people like that.
It's funny because over the last couple of years, I have two kids, a son and a daughter, and my son very much like me in that, growing up, anytime we had parent-teacher conversation or, the parent-teacher conferences, it would be, oh, great kid, but, he really likes to talk a lot. And that was the same thing with me. I've actually had a chance to look at some of my old report cards from like 3rd and 4th grade because my mom pulled them out recently, and it says the same thing.
Okay.
Really likes to talk in class. So it was just something that I did,
You
growing
like to express
up.
yourself.
I like to express myself.
Yeah.
I like to talk to people. And I think I do also, I get that from my grandfather. That was the same way he was, and I think I spent a lot of time with him, so I noticed how he was, and I think I kind of emulated that.
And your grandpa, he worked at a printing press. A lot of times, I worked in a machine shop for quite a while, and I realized it's me and the machine. So I'm sure once he got out of the printing press, he was like, his words were like all stored up, ready to be used on family, friends, whatever it was.
Yeah, you're actually, in a way, you're alone for a good majority of it.
A lot of time to think.
You do because you're all spread out, and you're not there on top of one another, getting a chance to communicate a lot. So absolutely.
Is your grandpa still alive?
He is not, unfortunately.
Okay, would you consider him one of your mentors?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I would. No offense to my parents, but
Yep.
they even know this. I feel like 80% of who I've become really was because of my relationship with him and how we interacted together. And it's great because I see my son doing the same thing with my dad, and it's just that fun relationship that kids have with their grandparents.
So I think for a lot of empty nester, like I had breakfast this morning with a group of guys that were empty nesters, right? And now they're having young grandkids, and there's a little emptiness to them. But I think you've given them a lot of hope, and me too, in the sense that hey, just when you've raised your kids, then there's that second breath or second wind of life, where you might have the opportunity to be what your grandparent was to you, is one of the most precious and special relationships.
Absolutely. And I said to my son, the other day, I don't know why. I think I was just kind of looking for something else to do, but I decided to do my own oil change. And so I said to my son, hey, why don't you come out and, you can go through this with me and I'll teach you.
Show you how it works.
And I was just explaining to him, why it's important to learn, different things. And he said, well, didn't Papa teach you that? And I said, well, no, because when I was growing up, Papa was working a lot, and he was working a lot of nights. And with my schedule as far as sports, we didn't really get a chance to cross paths that much with that kind of thing. Yeah. So it's something that I wish could have happened, but just the way things work out in life, it doesn't always happen that way. And he said, oh, well, he's teaching me so much stuff now because now he's on a, completely different schedule. So he's learning so much from him, which is great because he'll probably teach me something one day.
Yeah. And was your grandpa intentional? Or was it just kind of happenstance relational?
I think it was kind of happenstance relational.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So did he live close by?
He did. So we ended up living, I'll say 8 blocks away. We both lived in Brookfield.
That's great.
He was on one side of town, I was on another, and they moved there when I was in 3rd grade, which was great because on the way to their house was the baseball card shop. So anytime I went to the baseball card shop, I would just go over there. I'd ride my bike there, and that became a thing for me.
That's great.
And it's funny because we live on the other side of the subdivision from my parents, so my kids do the same thing with them.
So that, by the way, you may look at it and go, yeah, kind of happenstance, right? But your grandpa probably was like, I ain't moving. Yeah. Like, why do I want to, I want to stay close. And that in it of itself is intentionality, as opposed to I'm going to go to Florida or I'm going to do whatever. I'm going to be here and be close and be involved.
Yeah.
That's cool. All right, so great. I was going to talk to you about mentors, but okay. So Tony, we're back at the. So what? Now tell us about that transition into Title.
So things kind of just pivoted a little bit, and ironically, I think it really stems from I want to say I met my wife, but I've actually known my wife for a very long time since we were kids. We grew up in the same town, but just started dating later on in life. And at that point, I didn't necessarily see any career that I wanted to explore there.
Okay.
I liked the people that I worked with.
You wanted a future. You wanted a professional future.
Yeah. So I got into mortgage lending. When rates were astronomically low and anybody with a heartbeat could get a mortgage.
Was this the early 2000s?
It was the early 2000s.
Okay.
And so I started doing that, and that was my intro into real estate.
Okay.
But that really burned me out from the perspective of I didn't like that everybody could get a loan.
Yeah.
I would have people that would come in and I would look at them and say, I can approve you, but tell me how you're going to feed your family because I see what kind of money you're making. Yeah. And there's no money left over after this housing payment. And the more and more that started to happen, the more and more I liked real estate, but I just didn't like what I was doing at that point. I was still young enough. A good friend of mine from college happened to work at Ticor as a closer. and he said, hey, we need a closer, and it'd be great to have another guy around here.
And this is 2004?
This is late 4 into 5.
Okay, so this is still in the boom time.
It is. It's still in the boom time.
Yep.
So that's when I jumped into the title insurance pool, and I haven't gotten out since.
Okay. And so you started on the service side of things, which is still outward facing. So you understand the impact of a good closing.
It's one of the things that I always tell the salespeople, and I'll tell customers as well, is that I do understand what the closers are doing, going through, and what they're doing. And I know things have changed, and I closed on a HUD, and now we've got the disclosures, and so it is different. But I've had a chance to kind of go up the ladder a little bit, and so I know what they're going through, and I can appreciate that. So there's a lot of times where a sales rep might call me and say, oh, well, can you believe they did this? And I'll say, well, let me explain why. Here's why they would have done that. And I would have done the same thing because, and then you can kind of, give them a better understanding of it. And then they tend to have a different perspective on how things go, because not everybody had a chance to kind of do the other jobs within title insurance. And so I think that's definitely a benefit.
That's great. And so, Tony, at what point did you, because to be a closer, right, you got kind of good guaranteed income, you have a job to do, someone else is scaring up deals for you, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm going to switch over to sales now, right, where now I'm on, my production is on the line. I got to get them to say yes. I got to bring them over the finish line. And what had you thinking about that, and why'd you do it?
Well, it was kind of one of those situations where I was young and dumb and didn't really understand that I could say no if I wanted to.
Okay.
It was more of I was approached with the opportunity, and
Is this still at Ticor?
This is still at Ticor.
Okay.
And it worked out really well because the office that I worked out of had some great salespeople there. And one of them happened to leave to go into national commercial.
Okay.
There's a void. Well, that void was a lot of the customer base that I had closed deals with.
So it's kind of a soft way to step into
Very soft way. I had a book of business that I could walk into, people that knew me, and people that I could still help out from a closing perspective. Some of the attorneys would actually call me when they were closing at other companies that had the same software and would say, hey, I'm going to hand you the phone to my closer. Can you show them how we can do the Coldwell Banker earnest money? Because that was always an issue the way it was handled. So it was one of those things that I kind of took to it from there, and it made it a whole lot easier for me.
That's great. Did you feel pressure, Tony, then as a salesperson, or was it just kind of like, wow, I just kind of stumbled into success and always kind of had success?
I felt like I stumbled into pressure. I stumbled into it, but it wasn't long after I got into it that the market tanked.
Yes.
And so now here's this sales job where,
there's not much
bringing
corn
in
on the
business.
ground. There's not much corn on the ground for the chickens to feed on.
And we had gone through a situation there where they did a...
so you became a salesperson before The Big Short hit.
I did.
And then you saw business dry up and people, and then you dealt with loan officers that were in a panic, realtors that were starving, and on we go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What'd you do to stay positive during those times, Tony?
I think at that point, I really just looked at it from the perspective of there's still business out there. I still know a lot of people out there, and I'm just going to try to, expand my net as much as I possibly can. And I do think one thing that kind of changed my mentality and my perspective on everything was we had just gone through a slashing of compensation corporate-wide. And everybody was freaking out. One day you wake up and you get an email and you're on a conference call that, hey, we're reducing everybody's salaries.
Good news.
Good news. Here you go. Business is slow, and now we're gonna reduce your salaries. And instead of freaking out, the first thing I did was look at it and go, boy, I'm glad I'm not a closer, because I know that as a sales rep, I can go out there and I can make up that lost
Yeah, it's kind of
money.
futures in my hand. That's an important aspect of sales, that you're not the victim. You can be your own hero.
Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think that, so for me, it was, I'm going to work harder and smarter because I want to bring in money so I can supplement the money that I lost. But more importantly, the more I went out and sold, the more closings in my office, and therefore the more potential for the closers to make more money
So you
in
can
my
help
office.
others out as
So
well.
it was kind of a two-pronged approach there.
Wow. And so that's great. And I'm sure you saw people flop out of the business during that time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they're like, hey,
it
time
was-
to go. I don't want the pressure or whatever it is.
Yeah, and there's similarities to how it is now.
Yeah.
At that point, a ton of LOs that I used to see regularly were gone,
Yep.
going to other places.
Yep.
Same thing with real estate agents. You'd see the familiar ones, and then all of a sudden they started disappearing. So it was very similar to the times now.
What, Tony, in your mind, what were the key elements of people that made it through that time?
I think that keeping a positive outlook and not dwelling on the negative, being able to look at it and go, yeah, we're in a bad spot. It's not permanent. So I'm going to keep, working my way through, and we are going to come out on the other side of this.
Yeah.
And I think, in doing that,
That's
not
really
only,
important to know that this is a cycle.
Absolutely.
And it might be a deeper cycle, but it is a cycle. It has to come back.
Yeah. And I think that with that, it just keeping that positive mentality and working harder, and then realizing that when we come out of it, not only will we be in that same position that we were when everything was good, but we're going to be better because we're trying to go out there and we're grabbing more customers.
Yeah, the
and
more
we're
people leave, the
developing
more available
relationships.
for me.
Absolutely.
Tony, there's a lot of, and I'm sure you had at that time the water cooler folks that it was one negative, bad story after another and all that. Did you avoid that kind of stuff?
I did. And, I think for me, I try to keep that positive approach. I was lucky enough where are we at? In about 2014, 2015, somewhere around there, I had moved on from Ticor, which was now Fidelity at the time. I worked for North American Title, and we did a regional managers meeting up in Minnesota, and we got a chance to have a meeting with a woman by the name of Dr. Sindra Kampoff, and she wrote a book called Beyond Grit. She is a professor at Minnesota State University. I believe she's still affiliated with the Minnesota Vikings, and she is one of the reasons why Adam Thielen credits his success from getting to Minnesota State to the Vikings, getting into the NFL and being as successful, because she really helped him with his mindset. And she, in her book, she has this approach where it is control the controllables. You can only control what you can control. So if
Don't worry
your
about the
boss,
rest.
don't worry about the rest.
Yeah.
If your boss makes a decision that, you don't like, you got two options. Option one is you can sit there and you can pout about it, and ultimately it's not going to get you anywhere.
Right.
Or you can sit down, you can pout for a second because you need to get that out.
Yeah.
And then you can say, okay, how do I approach this now? How am I going to change?
How do I respond?
How do I respond?
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that for a long time I was doing that.
Yeah.
But the way she pointed it out, it really provided a lot of clarity in things and how I wanted to go about things,
Be more
moving
intentional.
forward and be more intentional. And I think, I actually have bought the book for the sales team, and
I'm
you've
just
got
started.
it as
Yep.
well. And I think it's something great, and there's a lot of things that you can take away from it. So
100%. Yeah.
yeah.
I'm enjoying it. So, Tony, at one point, you went from individual contributor, which is great. There's some people that were just built to individually contribute, and they do a great job at it, and they don't want to lead anybody. And that's fantastic. And many have made a great career with it. But then you decide to become or step into leadership. And has that been something that has, forget business, has that been, have there been earmarks of that in your life outside of business? I mean, I know you lead your family, with your wife and those kind of things, but was there anything else that shows, hey, this kid might be a leader here?
I have always tried to get involved in anything that I've been a part of, whether I was a school board president in my kids' school for a couple of years.
Yep. You're the hockey
hockey president. Well,
that's
emeritus now.
Okay, emeritus.
Thankfully, this will be my last year. I'm passing the torch there.
Those are big responsibilities.
Yeah.
I mean, because you got a lot of parents that are willing to bring the pitchfork and torches if you blow it.
Sports parents are crazy these days.
Yeah.
And then, for some reason, along with being the president of the school board, I took on the head of our largest fundraiser for the school. So I had to deal with that on a regular basis. So jumping into coaching sports teams and things like that, I've always wanted to be a part of things in a leadership role, and maybe not even realizing that I wanted to be in a leadership role, but I just like to be somebody that could contribute and then could provide for those that we're helping as well, whether it's teaching baseball to the kids when there was t-ball, or just showing different ways.
The People Not Titles podcast is proud to be sponsored by Landtrust Title Services, your partners for results.
Showing different ways to go about things and how we can improve things in whatever capacity it was.
So Tony, that's great, and I think it takes a person. There's a lot of energy that you give outside of work for that. But you seem to be a guy that gets energy from it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that you seem like you have enough to give. How do you maintain the energy?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I think it's what drives me. I just think that's a purpose.
Yeah.
And so I think.
So you believe in the school. And so you say, okay, if I believe in it, I'm going to be a part of the solution here.
Absolutely. And that was the same thing with the hockey club, that, there was new leadership was needed. And I had seen things that I liked from the club that we were with, and I had seen things that I didn't like from other clubs. And so being able to be there and grow upon things that I felt were not only good for the program, but good for the kids that were going to come through the program. So it's something that I wanted to be a part of.
That's awesome. Okay, so translate that to business. At what point in your career did leadership become a thing for you? Did someone tap you on the shoulder?
Yeah.
Did you apply for a gig? What was it?
No, so I was doing my sales thing. I was successful, and an opportunity opened up in DuPage County at Fidelity at the time, and I had closed there for about a year or so at one point, and so I was very familiar with the staff and the people, and it was one of those things where, again, they approached me and said, hey, this is the opening we have. We think you would be a good fit, and, how would you feel about it? And again, I think at that point I was still pretty young to where I didn't, it was like, oh, I can move up again.
Yeah, didn't know what you didn't know. Yeah.
Absolutely. Because I had that, almost like that old school 80s mentality of like, okay, here's the ladder and you're going to start on this rung.
Yeah.
And then you'll climb up to the next one and so on and so forth. So for me, it was like, okay, so I started at a closer and then I'm in sales, and now you want to move me into management. Okay, this is great. Like, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do.
Right. Yeah, and Tony, it seems to me like you're a bloom or you're planted type of guy, and then the opportunities open up. And I think that's a lesson for a lot of people. Sometimes we're looking at the other rung so much that you forget to do the job on the existing rung. And it's like, oh, I wish I was there. I wish I was there. But it's really a lot about really delivering value. And when you do, you kind of stick out and people go, hey, I think this is a person. We're always looking for someone that can go up to the next level.
I am somebody who I'm going to do my job. I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. And I'm not really looking here and there and everywhere. Like, I'm focused on the task at hand. And so there are some times where people just look and go, oh yeah, I think that he could fit there.
He's doing a good job, yeah.
I'm always willing to lend a hand wherever I can.
Absolutely. So looking at leadership, Tony, have you had bosses that you thought were bad bosses in your day?
Yes, absolutely.
So, and we don't need to name any names, but what stands out?
I think there are some bosses who will, who aren't really there to get the best out of you. And I think their way of approaching things at times have the potential to hinder versus help. And whether it's just, constant screaming, belittling, talking down to, or absent, completely absent. We'll talk a big game and, oh, I'm going to help you and I'll be there and I'll do this for you. And then it's crickets. And so I think, I've learned a lot from each boss that I've had that I felt like, wasn't the best that they could be.
Yeah, Tony, I've had bad bosses too, and I've had really great bosses. And a good boss can have you waking up every day going, I'm excited to go to work. And a bad boss can have you absolutely dreading it. And the impact on the organization is insurmountable if you have a boss that is, abusive, doesn't care about you, or any of those things. And I think that you've really taken that to the next level in your leadership.
There was something, and I'm sure I'm going to get this wrong, but I had read a long time ago about people leave bosses, not companies.
Yeah, they don't quit their job, they quit their boss.
Yes,
yeah.
and I think that is very true.
Yeah.
And your point about the getting up in the morning, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, I can think back to the alarm going off at different jobs that I've had, where I would hit the snooze button.
Yeah.
And I would hit the snooze, and I hate hitting the snooze button.
Yeah.
And I would hit the snooze button, and I'd hit the snooze, and I did not want to get out of bed.
Yeah.
Then there were other jobs where the alarm would go off. I may not even need the alarm. I'm just getting up and ready to get going. And those are the most enjoyable because it's not work.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing. It's not work then.
Yeah. So, Tony, for the people you lead now, what do they get when they get Tony? Who are they getting?
First, they're going to have a partner.
Yeah.
I'm going to be there. I'm going to help them with whatever I can. They're going to get somebody who is going to really treat them as an equal because I've done that job. I've been there. I know the ups and downs. I don't need to, yell at anybody, scream at anybody, belittle anybody.
Right.
I understand there's ebbs and flows to everything. If I see something that's out of line, I'm going to I'm going to address that. But they're really going to get somebody who is all in on trying to help them become the best that they can be at their job.
Yeah, I like that. And I noticed that in your leadership style. There's some bosses that leave you alone, and maybe they might even say, oh yeah, I like my boss because he leaves me alone. That's not necessarily the best leader that leaves you alone, right? You are, even you're having the tough conversations in many ways to help them to go to that next level, to not, you don't want to be in somewhere for 10 years and go, I'm the same person I was. That's not success, right? You want to help them to get to that next level. What drives that, Tony?
I think that I look back at some of the best bosses I've had, and I think to how they helped me and what they did to get me to that next step, and I use that as motivation. I mean, don't get me wrong, I take a laissez-faire kind of approach because I feel like when you get, when you have a high-end salesperson,
you just got to get stuff out of their way and help them.
You've got to help them, but you don't want to get in their way.
Yeah, over-tinker.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you just want to be there for that support. You check in,
yeah,
but you don't necessarily want to meddle.
Yeah.
I had a situation, and I won't name, people in this, but I had a sales rep that worked under me, and he was in the top like 10 in the country in as far as sales revenue was concerned. And I was asked what I was going to do to, really, keep him on track. And I said, what do you mean?
Yeah, stay the hell out of his way.
The next 3 reps,
Right.
combined don't have his
Right.
numbers. Why
Right.
would I want to meddle
Yeah.
with
What
something
are you
that's
gonna-
going well?
Yeah.
Well, he takes off, to go to ball games here. And I said, I don't care if he
Great.
works 3 days a week as a sales rep. If you produce and if you do your job and you become an elite salesperson, that's what sales is.
Maybe the ball game is part of the formula.
Somebody should, let's take notes. What did they do to get to this point? Because it was right. Whatever
Absolutely.
they did, it was right.
Yeah, I think you're looking at that right. Tony, every now and then, as a leader, you have to have a tough conversation. And so, how do you approach those?
So, from a communication standpoint, positive or negative, every person is completely different. And I do have a degree in communication, so that does help a little bit. Usually at home is where I screw up all the communication. At work, I'm really good with that. But I know my audience, and I know how to handle a conversation with them. So you've been with somebody long enough, you understand, okay, they need to be made to feel this way or address it this way. Some people might want a little more of a stern talking to. Some people might just want it simplified. So it really is a different approach depending upon who it is I'm talking to and what it is that we're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, is your production low, and we've got to talk about that, or are you berating people in the office because they didn't do what you thought they should do? So in each situation, I'm going to handle things differently depending upon what that situation
Yeah,
is.
so it's nuanced, right?
It's
not one
completely
size
nuanced.
fits.
No.
And I think, Tony, one of the things that you've been really intentional about is building that trust first, so that they know it's coming from the right spot.
Absolutely.
And when you have that, then you can even mess up the conversation, but they know this guy actually has my best interest in heart. He's trying to communicate something. That I think that's how it really lands and sinks in.
No matter where I've been, my team is always going to know that, number one, I care about them. I care about their overall well-being, whether it's, here when they're at work or even at home. That's a big thing for me. I want them to know that, I'm here for them.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to me.
Yeah. So Tony, we're in the Illinois area where there's attorney agency, and so let's move on to the customers and clients. What is important for you to deliver to your attorney partners or to your clients, whether it be commercial lenders, whatever it is? What's important to you?
The obvious is you have to deliver a level of service that is, in my opinion, it's got to be above what the norm is in the market. When I was at North American Title, we always, would talk about, like, if the market's here, you gotta go above it. I mean, you don't want to go so high above it that when you drop a little bit, it's noticeable.
It's hard to maintain that.
It's hard to maintain that level.
Ring out the brag on the people and all that to try to do all those things.
But you have got to make sure that it is the most important transaction in people's lives. I mean, unless they're one day going to come into some money and they're going to buy a company or something like that.
Sure.
Buying a home, it's stressful.
It's a big deal.
It's a big deal. It's either, potentially starting a family or moving on to that second home. And either way, it's stressful. I mean, I remember when we bought our first condo and my wife looked at the till and was like, doesn't anybody do anything for free anymore? That's how much we're paying. And I got a chuckle out of it, but we can screw up all of the good work that has been done up until they get to our closing room.
Yeah.
And for me, number one is being able to be there for them to make sure that if there is a problem, we're right there to jump in and solve that.
Problems happen. It's how you handle them, right?
Problems are going to happen
Yeah.
until, we're run by robots and we can make it so that there are no problems. Like, we're humans.
Yeah.
We're going to make a mistake. 35 is going to become 53 at some point on a statement. It's just going to happen. How do you address that?
Yes.
Number two, and it's the same kind of situation with the sales team. I'm there for them.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that the salespeople feel the same way about their customers.
Yeah.
Because
I have to drive over here. I have to pick something up. But whatever it is, you know the standard is I'm going to do it.
I have to interact with you.
Yeah.
So I want to have a good relationship with you.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be more friendly with my customers than I want it to be, more of the suit and tie business kind of relationship. And that's how it's become with a lot of my customers over the years. And I think that's important because letting them also know that, hey, I'm here for you. And not only do I want you to, continue sending business and grow this relationship, but I want to be a partner that can help you grow your business as well. I know some people that I can introduce you to, or, hey, have you thought about getting into this market because there's more business there? Those are the things that I want to do with the customers.
You're kind of taking that consultative approach.
Absolutely.
I care about your business. We're not just, we want to get the transaction right, but I care about your business. I want to help you build and grow.
Yep.
Tony, kind of wrapping up, are there any personal practices that you employ in your life? Is it goal setting, a daily thing or something that someone can take and go, hey, that might work for me?
So I have a couple of different things that I do. Number one is, and I try to do this regularly. I don't always because things get away, but
sure.
Number one, for me personally, mentally, I try to meditate as much as I can and get it on a daily basis.
Just get still, get quiet.
Get still, get quiet. It doesn't have to be anything big and long, and just even as simple as a minute or two, just to relax and kind of unplug. Because
get present.
In this business, there's so many different things that we're always thinking about. Hey, we're trying to recruit this person, or I've got this person that's yelling about this, or we've got to deal with him,
emails are coming in,
or the emails are coming in, and so your brain is constantly boom, 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 boom. And to be able to just go, hold on a minute, I'm going to unplug this. I'm going to just get myself set, and then I can move forward. And it's always something where I come out of it feeling better.
That's great.
And so that's number one. Number two, yes, goal setting. And it's short and long term. We talk about a lot of times with the sales team, low-lying fruit. There are so many customers out there that are, ignored by their current title company because they're not the big name, or they don't have the big volume. And my approach is always, I'd rather have 100 guys that give me one than one guy that gives me 100. So I don't care if you have one deal or 100 deals. So, setting those goals of, hey, I'm going to try to reach these type of people or these type of people. And then long term, that's going to translate into this. I'll assess where each, sales rep is, what are they targeting? And I'll try to, set a goal for myself to say, okay, I'm going to meet with them, this day or this day. Like Ani and I are having a meeting next week. Carmen and I check in regularly. Denise and I have been working on a little project. Obviously, you came in and we were talking about that. So,
a lot of collaboration.
But I think that those are some of the things that I definitely will do, and I will do regularly. The other thing is I like to visit a lot of our offices as well. And I like to go around. I'd like to make sure I see everybody there, because I feel that, to be present there and to let people know, hey, he's actually here.
Yeah, we know
and
this.
we know him,
Yeah.
and he's doing things, and he volunteered to come out and pick up a check and drive it over here, or he's going all the way over there. I can't believe he would do that. Those are the things that I like to do, because I feel like when you do that, it really shows people what you're about.
Sure.
And I think then you get that respect from people, and there's a little more of a, okay, maybe he is one of us, and we can kind of let him in, and
Well,
So,
and there's a lot to that, Tony. When you then at the time where you need to have something done or you need to make the ask, it's like they know me.
Yeah.
I've paid attention to them.
absolutely. You
know?
build a little credit there.
Build a little credit there.
Yeah.
All right, Tony. Let's just talk in kind of closing, really closing. What's the vision for the Landtrust group in Illinois? I know we have you had a solid sales group. We just added a nice group up in Gurnee, and we're just getting them stabilized. What is your hope over the next, let's say, 18 months to build here at Landtrust?
Yeah, I think build is the key. A couple of times I've gone back and referenced the North American title, and they're no longer around. And I tell everybody that there's a lot of similarities I see. And so when I first started there, it was a great group of people that just needed help with growth.
Yeah.
And kind of changing a vision, not even changing, just a slight modification on things. And I see a very similar situation here. It's a great group of people.
Yeah.
Everybody is willing to lend a hand and do whatever needs to be done, provide an exceptional service level. And I think just looking at areas where we currently don't have a presence and trying to get into there and continue that growth, because
That's awesome.
I really like what we can do. I really like our mindset of how we are looking to grow. And I think that this gives a lot of people a place where they could come to, and it's not a job. It's a job.
Yeah,
but
there's some things you got to do that might be unpleasant or whatever. You got to show up and grind.
You can have fun in doing it, and you can wake up every day and you're not dreading coming in. Yeah. And I think that's
not stuffy, not corporate, not
exactly.
that kind of thing.
And that's again, a fun environment where you go, I can't wait to get in there. And it's 5 o'clock already. Like, those are the best.
Yeah.
When you work at a place and you get in, and the next thing you know, you're like, I can't believe it's 4 o'clock already.
I gotta go home. Yeah.
Like, that's not a job.
Yeah.
That's just having fun. And nobody wants to really have a job and have to work. So you go and you have a job and you have fun and you work with great people.
And you have an opportunity to build and grow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great. So, Tony, I just want to say, from People Not Titles, I want to say thanks. We learned a lot about you. We'll have your email address. If there's a rep out there that goes, hey, listen, Tony seems like a kind of guy that I'd like to connect with, or a real estate broker or an attorney that might say, hey, I'd like to find out more about Landtrust.
Absolutely.
They can reach out and do that. So,
for sure.
Yeah, so thank you, Tony, and this is People Not Titles, signing off. Hey, thanks for listening to the People Not Titles podcast. We are proudly sponsored by Landtrust Title Services. If you enjoyed the podcast, please hit the like button, please subscribe, and we'd love it if you'd share our podcast with your friends. Thanks a lot.